She was just a poor girl struggling to care for her disabled younger brother. But everything changed the day she helped an old woman carry her belongings. She had no idea that this small act of kindness would open a new door in her life. Sophie received a job offer, yet the house she worked in held many secrets. One of those secrets was love. How did her compassion lead to such a profound change? And who exactly was the mysterious woman she helped that day? Sit back and discover this powerful story. Sophie, a poor girl, helped an elderly woman on the road, unaware that her life was about to transform forever. A simple gesture of kindness would become the greatest blessing she had ever hoped for. Sitting beneath a large mango tree beside a dusty path, Sophie clutched a small black nylon bag filled with food, tears streaming down her swollen eyes. Her clothes were worn and faded, and she hadn't eaten since the previous day. Yet, her thoughts weren't about herself. Her younger brother Caleb, injured in the accident that claimed their parents, had also gone without food. Caleb struggled to walk and relied on wooden crutches. Looking up at the sky, Sophie whispered, "God, please. Caleb is suffering, and I don't know what else to do." As she wiped her tears, a frail voice interrupted. "My daughter," it said softly, "please help me. I haven't eaten since yesterday." Sophie looked up to see an elderly woman, her face tired and her clothes torn, wearing only one worn slipper. She had no bag or food, only sorrow in her eyes. The woman gently pointed to Sophie's nylon bag. "Could you share some of your food with me, please?" Sophie held the bag tightly to her chest. "I'm sorry, it's for my brother. He hasn't eaten and is very sick," she replied, her voice trembling. "I would love to help you," she added, "but this is all we have." The woman lowered her gaze, silent. Slowly, she moved to a nearby stone and sat down, placing a trembling hand over her chest. "Even one bite would save me," she said softly. Sophie noticed the dryness of the woman's feet, the torn edges of her clothes, and the fatigue in her shaking hands. A heaviness settled in Sophie's throat. Closing her eyes, her heart raced. When she opened them, the woman's lips were cracked and dry, but she sat quietly, no longer pleading. Moved by compassion, Sophie knelt beside her, untied the nylon bag, and took out the small white plate inside, still warm. "Please take this," Sophie said softly. Surprised, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "God bless you, child," she whispered. The silence that followed felt different inside Sophie's heart. She sensed this moment would change her life forever. When Sophie returned home, she opened the wooden door and stepped into their small room. Caleb sat by the window, gazing at the sky. His eyes brightened when he saw her. "Sophie," he called, "did you bring the food?" Sophie nodded slowly. "I did, but I gave it to an old woman. She was hungry, too." Caleb's face fell. "But I'm so hungry, Sophie," he said weakly. She hurried to him and sat close, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "I know, Caleb. I know," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't want to, but when I saw her sitting there, tired and weak, my heart wouldn't let me leave her." Caleb leaned against her shoulder, and silence stretched between them until he asked quietly, "Will we ever be okay?" Sophie held him tighter but said nothing. Later that morning, Sophie went to work at a construction site. Her task was to fetch water and fill large drums. The sun was scorching, the ground dry, and her legs and hands grew weary. Having eaten nothing that morning, she felt weaker with every bucket. Trying to smile at her co-workers, her lips felt cracked and dry. By afternoon, she could no longer stand upright. Dropping her bucket, she walked to a nearby tree and sat down on the hot sand, closing her eyes briefly. Before she realized it, she had fallen asleep. Mr. Amos, the supervisor, arrived wearing a shirt and dark glasses. Scanning the site, he asked, Where is that woman? A worker pointed to the tree. Mr. Amos hurried over and found Sophie lying on the ground, exhausted and dusty, sweat covering her face. So, you're sleeping while others are working, he barked. Startled, Sophie sat up quickly. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to sleep, I was just tired. Tired? He repeated angrily. Am I paying you to sleep? Sophie opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her legs trembled, and her gaze dropped to the sand beneath her. Mr. Amos laughed harshly. You're lazy. Get out of my sight this instant. Please, sir, Sophie pleaded, kneeling. Don't send me away. I need this job. Turning his back, he said, You won't get a dime from me. Not even 1 naira. Tears streamed down Sophie's face as he walked away. She stood slowly, legs shaking, and walked home. Caleb remained by the window, and upon seeing her, he sensed something was wrong. Sophie, he whispered. What happened? Sitting on the floor, she hid her face in her hands. I lost the job. Crawling to her side, Caleb grasped her hand. What will we do now? No answer came, and they sat in silence until Caleb looked up and said quietly, Dad, Mom, we are suffering. Tears filled Sophie's eyes as they both prayed silently. That night, the small room was still. Caleb had fallen asleep early, clutching a pillow. Sophie sat awake against the wall, eyes open, staring at the old zinc roof. A drop of water fell from a leaking corner. Despite the heat, she covered Caleb's legs with a worn wrapper and sighed deeply, placing her hand gently on his chest. God, I don't know what to do anymore. Please help me. My brother needs food and a doctor. Show me the way. She wiped her tears, looked up, closed her eyes, and prayed quietly until sleep came. The next day, Sophie ventured into a more developed part of the city. Her feet were dusty as she searched for work all morning, but no one was hiring. Passing a large house with flowers in front, she noticed a small wooden sign on the gate. Housekeeper needed urgently, apply in person. Stopping, her heart raced. Looking up at the sky, she whispered, God, please help me. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on the gate. After a few seconds, footsteps approached, and the gate creaked open. A man in a brown security uniform looked her over. Yes? What do you want? He asked. Sophie swallowed hard. I saw the sign, sir. I'm here for the housekeeper position. The guard scanned her again. You came for the housekeeper job. She nodded quickly. Yes, sir. He looked inside the compound and said, The boss isn't here now, but you can come back tomorrow morning. He'll want to see you himself. Sophie's face fell. Please, sir, may I wait for him? No need. He doesn't like strangers waiting at the gate. Just come early tomorrow, before 8. Thank you, sir. I will, she replied softly and turned to leave. The man watched her walk away before gently closing the gate. As Sophie walked down the dusty road, her legs weak but her heart hopeful, she whispered, God, please don't let me miss this chance. Near her home, she spotted the same old woman she had helped, the one with tired eyes and torn slippers, carrying a heavy sack on her back. The woman moved slowly, bent forward under the weight. Sophie ran to her. Mama, she called. The woman turned, breathing hard. You again, she said, smiling faintly. God bless you, my daughter. Sophie lifted the sack. Let me help you. This is too heavy. The old woman smiled warmly. You are truly a child of light. May your days be filled with joy. Sophie smiled, despite aching arms. As they walked together, the woman asked, How is your brother? Sophie looked down. Still the same. The woman nodded. You helped me when you had nothing. Heaven saw that. Good things will come your way. Sophie remained silent for a moment before the woman stopped and placed a hand over her chest. My name is Deborah, but you can call me Mama D. Sophie's face brightened. Deborah. What a beautiful name. I like it. Mama D smiled. Thank you, my child. What's your name? Sophie, she replied softly. They continued walking slowly, step by step, both quiet. The next morning, before sunrise, Sophie woke early. She fetched water, bathed quickly, and dressed in the neatest clothes she owned. After combing her hair and tying a scarf, she kissed Caleb's forehead. Pray for me, she whispered. When she arrived at the big house, the guard from the previous day smiled at her. You came early. Yes, sir. Thank you, Sophie answered. He led her inside, where a tall man with calm eyes and a clean shirt sat drinking tea. He studied Sophie carefully. You're here for the housekeeper job. Yes, sir, Sophie said, standing straight. The man set down his cup. I'm Mr. Sampson, the owner of this house. You can sit, he said, pointing to a chair. Sophie nodded and sat. Can you clean the entire house properly? He asked. Yes, sir, she replied. Mr. Sampson looked at her intently before continuing. This job isn't for someone who will live here. You'll come each morning to clean the house, wash clothes, and handle any tasks needed to be done by evening. You go back home. You understand? Yes, sir, Sophie replied quickly. I'm fine with that, Mr. Sampson smiled. Good, you're hired. Sophie's mouth opened slightly. Sir, really? Yes. Mr. Sampson said, You look honest. I believe in honest people. Sophie covered her mouth. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Mr. Sampson waved his hand. Start tomorrow. As Sophie stepped out of the compound, her legs felt light and her heart was full. Maybe, just maybe, her story was beginning to change. She ran home, her slippers making soft sounds on the ground. Her heart was beating fast, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from joy. When she reached their small house, she opened the door and called out, Caleb. Caleb sat on the mat, looking weak, but when he saw her smile, he sat up quickly. What happened? He asked, eyes wide. Sophie laughed and dropped to her knees beside him. I got the job. They gave me the housekeeper job. Caleb's eyes filled with tears. He pulled Sophie close and hugged her tightly. You did it, Sophie. You really did it, he whispered. She held him tighter. Now we can save money, she said. We can start planning for your surgery. Caleb nodded slowly. I believe again, he said softly. A few days later, after work, Sophie and Caleb took a slow walk near the road. The evening breeze touched their faces. Caleb held her hand as they walked, using his wooden crutches carefully, one slow step at a time. Suddenly, Sophie spotted someone ahead. It was Mama D. She looked tired and was dragging two heavy bags behind her. Mama! Sophie called out. Mama D looked up, surprised, her face lighting up. You again, she said, running towards Sophie, with Caleb following slowly. Let me help you, Sophie offered, picking up one bag. Mama D smiled warmly. You both have kind hearts. When they reached a quiet spot, Mama D looked at Caleb closely. She gently placed her hand on his head, then touched his legs, closing her eyes. You will walk well again, my son. Caleb looked at her, eyes full of emotion. Thank you, Mama, he said softly. They all smiled, then walked down the street together. Every morning, Sophie arrived at Mr. Sampson's house before the sun was high. She knocked gently on the gate, and the guard opened it for her. "Morning," he greeted. Inside the big house, Sophie worked hard, sweeping the floors, washing Mr. Sampson's clothes and hanging them neatly, cleaning chairs, windows, even the corners. She never complained. When she finished, she wiped her face and smiled. Sometimes Mr. Sampson sat outside reading a newspaper, watching her closely. She didn't talk much but worked as if the house belonged to her. One afternoon, he called her, "Sophie." She turned quickly. "Yes, sir." He looked at her carefully. "You're very quiet, and you work with your whole heart." Sophie smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir." Mr. Sampson nodded slowly. "Keep it up," he said. She bowed her head. "Yes, sir." But deep inside him, something was stirring. He didn't know what it was yet. One evening, Mr. Sampson arrived home looking tired. His shoulders were slumped, and his face heavy. As he entered the sitting room, he stopped by the table where a hot plate of food, yam porridge, fresh and sweet-smelling, sat with a small note beside it. It read, "Good evening, sir. I thought you might be hungry after a long day at work. I hope this helps. Sophie." Mr. Sampson stood still, staring first at the food, then at the note again. He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly but didn't eat. He just sat there, thinking. His eyes moved toward the kitchen. The pots were clean, the dishes washed, the floor neat. Cooking wasn't part of Sophie's job. She was only supposed to clean and leave by evening, but she had gone beyond what was expected. "No one has ever done this for me since my cook traveled," he said quietly to himself. He touched the note again and smiled. "Sophie," he whispered. "Who are you really?" The next day, Mr. Sampson sat in his room, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was calm, but his eyes looked tired. "Mama, you know I want you to stay here with me," he said. His mother's voice came from the other end. "I know, my son, but I won't stay in that big house with you. I have my reasons." Sampson sighed. "You only visit once in a while. I miss you." She laughed softly. "I miss you too, but that place is too quiet for me." Then her voice changed. "Sampson, what about your future? You're not getting younger." Sampson looked down. "Mama, please, not again." She continued, "You don't even have a fiancé. Look at your mates, all married with children." Sampson stayed silent. "I'm not saying you must marry now," she said, "but at least have someone close, someone with a good heart. In fact, I have someone in mind, someone I've been observing for a while. She's perfect for a wife. I'll arrange your meeting with her. Please don't say no." "I understand," he said softly. They spoke for a few more minutes, then ended the call. Mr. Sampson lay on his bed deep in thought. Outside, the night was quiet, but inside, his heart was restless. One day, Mr. Sampson sat in his living room pretending to read the newspaper, but his eyes were on Sophie, who was outside sweeping the front of the house. His heart beat slowly but hard. "She's not like other girls," he whispered to himself. Later that afternoon, Sophie came inside to mop the sitting room. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted politely. "Good afternoon, Sophie," he replied. As she worked, he kept glancing at her. Her steps were calm, her hands moved gently, and she spoke only when necessary. Mr. Sampson looked down at his own hands, realizing he had never felt this way before. He shook his head slightly and smiled. "Why is my heart beating like this?" he whispered, though deep inside, he already knew the answer. That same week, Sampson was in his office getting ready to leave for the day. He packed his laptop into his bag and zipped it up when his phone rang. He saw it was Mom and answered with a smile. "Mama, good evening." Her voice was soft and cheerful. "My son, how are you?" "I'm fine, Mama, just about to leave the office." She cleared her throat. "I've been thinking, I want to come and spend a few days with you." "You mean it?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I'll come tomorrow if that's okay." He smiled deeply. "Thank you, Mama. I've missed you." "I've missed you too," she said. "Okay, Mama, I'll be waiting." They said goodbye and ended the call. It was a quiet morning. Sophie was inside the sitting room, dusting the chairs as usual. She wiped every corner and moved slowly to the next. Just then, Mr. Sampson walked in and stood by the door, watching her for a moment before speaking. "Sophie," he said softly. She turned quickly. "Yes, sir." He stepped closer. "Please clean the guest room. My mother will be coming over and staying for a few days." Sophie nodded. "All right, sir. I will clean it now." Mr. Sampson looked at her calmly, paused, then said gently, "Please be on your best behavior." Sophie stood still for a second, not understanding why he said that, but she didn't ask. She only nodded. "Yes, sir." As he walked away, she continued with her duties. Later that afternoon, Sophie was in the dining room, wiping the table carefully, wanting everything to sparkle. After all, it was the boss's mother who was coming. As she cleaned, she suddenly heard a knock at the door. Mr. Sampson rose quickly from his chair in the study and went to answer it. Sophie glanced up from the dining area, watching quietly. When the door opened, Mr. Sampson's face lit up with a wide smile. "Mom," he said, stepping forward to embrace the woman warmly. Sophie stood still, eyes fixed on the scene before her. As soon as she recognized the woman, her body froze. The hand towel remained in her hand, her legs stopped moving, and her mouth fell slightly open. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The woman Mr. Sampson was hugging was someone she had met before, someone she had helped. Sophie stood motionless, the room suddenly feeling hushed. She whispered to herself, "No, it can't be." Holding the cleaning cloth tightly, her eyes widened in disbelief. There, smiling by the door and holding a small handbag, was Mama D, the same woman she used to assist by the roadside, the one she had once given her last meal to. "Mama D," Sophie said softly, her voice shaking. Mama D's smile faded slowly as she blinked in surprise. "Sophie?" she whispered. They stared at each other, both in shock. Mr. Sampson stood between them, confused, looking first at Sophie, then at his mother, then back to Sophie. "Wait," he said, stepping closer. "Do you two know each other?" Sophie's mouth was still slightly open. She lowered her gaze and nodded slowly. Mama D said nothing, her eyes scanning the room before resting on Sophie, then on her son. Sampson narrowed his eyes. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone more serious. Mama D took a deep breath and quietly suggested, "Let's all sit down." They moved to the living room, the air heavy as if something important was about to be revealed. Sophie sat on the edge of a chair, clearly worried. Sampson folded his arms, waiting silently. Mama D settled gently and looked at Sophie with a kind smile before turning to her son. "Sampson, there's something I didn't tell you. I did something behind your back, but it was for a reason." Sampson raised his eyebrows, confused. "I went out dressed like a poor woman," she explained. "I wanted to test the hearts of some young girls." She glanced at Sophie, who now sat with her head bowed, quietly wiping tears from her cheeks. "She didn't know who I was. She didn't help me for money or favor, she helped from her heart," Mama D continued. Even when she had nothing, she gave me her last food. Sophie sniffed softly, trying to control her emotions. She carried heavy things when no one else would stop. And through it all, she still talked about her brother, how he was crippled, how she needed money for his surgery. Yet, she found the strength to help me. Mama D shook her head slowly. She's not just kind. She's rare, she said with a proud smile. The kind of woman a man should never take for granted. The room fell silent again. Samson sat quietly, staring at the floor, deep in thought. Slowly, he leaned back into his chair, his eyes blank and lips tight. He remained silent, the heavy quiet filling the space. Then Samson rose from his chair, hands in his pockets, and without a word, turned and walked to his room. The door closed softly behind him. Inside, Samson stood by the window, gazing out at the blue sky. His heart was full as he reflected on all the times he had watched Sophie working. How she cleaned, cooked, and always went beyond what was asked, even when it wasn't her duty. He had often wondered why she remained so calm and strong despite her struggles. Now, he understood. She wasn't just doing her job. She was simply being Sophie. He whispered to himself, "She's just being Sophie," and continued staring out, lost in thought. Back in the living room, Mama D reached out and gently patted Sophie's shoulder. "My dear, wipe your tears," she said softly. "Good hearts like yours don't go unnoticed forever." Sophie looked up slowly, her eyes still wet, her heart still shaking. But deep inside, a warmth began to grow. She glanced at the clock on the wall, then stood quickly. "Thank you, Ma. I need to go take care of my brother now." Mama D held her hand gently. "Please stay a little longer," she urged softly. "Just a few more minutes." Sophie smiled, though her eyes betrayed her tiredness. "I really want to, Ma, but I can't. My brother is waiting. He hasn't eaten, and his leg was hurting this morning." Mama D studied her for a moment, her heart swelling. "You're a strong girl," she said. "Your brother is lucky to have you." Sophie nodded slowly. "He's all I have, Mama." As Sophie turned to leave, Mama D followed her to the door. "Please be careful," she said softly, "and greet him for me." Sophie smiled, then walked out. Mama D stood at the door, watching her go, her eyes glistening with tears. She placed a hand on her chest and whispered, "That girl. God really brought her for a reason." The house grew quiet, the lights dimmed low. Mama D walked slowly to her son's room and knocked softly. "Come in," Samson's voice called. She opened the door and entered. Samson sat on the bed, holding a book but not reading. "I'm sorry," Mama D said gently. "For what, Mom?" Samson asked. "For not telling you sooner about what I was doing," she replied. "I only wanted to find a wife for you, not just any woman, but one with a pure heart." Samson closed the book and set it aside. "Mom," he said quietly, "I think I already know." Mama D looked surprised. "You do?" He sighed, calm but serious. "I've been watching Sophie too. Not because of your plan, I didn't even know about it, but something about her touched me." Mama D listened closely. "She doesn't pretend. She doesn't talk much. She just does the right thing, even when no one is watching, even when she's tired." There was a pause, then Samson added, "Mom, I care about her deeply. I think I'm falling for her." Mama D jumped up and clapped her hands. "My son, then follow your heart. Don't waste time." Samson smiled faintly, but his eyes seemed distant. "Mom," he said, "what if she says no?" Mama D sat back down, holding his hand. "She won't. A girl like Sophie doesn't give her heart to just anyone. You've already entered it. She just doesn't realize it yet. The next morning was quiet. The sun was just rising when Samson stood outside the gate, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the road. He hadn't slept much, his mind filled with thoughts of Sophie. Her smile, her gentle voice, the way she helped without complaint. Then he saw her. Sophie was walking slowly, carrying a small nylon bag. Her scarf was neatly tied, and she looked peaceful yet energetic. Samson's heart quickened. He smiled softly as she approached. In his mind, he whispered, "That's her. That's the woman I want, not for her looks, but for her heart." He stood quietly, waiting. As Sophie neared, she greeted politely, "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, Sophie," he replied warmly. She didn't know he had been waiting just for her, or that today would be unlike any other. Samson watched as she entered the house. Sophie went inside to greet Mama D. "Good morning, Mama," she said, bowing slightly. Mama D smiled warmly. "Good morning, my daughter. How is your brother?" "He's fine, Ma." "Thank you," Sophie replied softly. Mama D reached out to touch Mama D gently touched her shoulder. "May God bless you, my daughter." "Thank you, Ma," Sophie replied softly and went back to her work. As she was about to leave after finishing her chores, she heard Mr. Samson call her. "Sophie," he said. She turned around. "Please, come," he invited from his seat. She walked over and stood beside him. Noticing something different, she saw a quiet smile on his face. Looking up, he said, "There's something I want to tell you." Sophie nodded, her eyes uncertain. Mr. Samson stood, took a deep breath, and looked straight into her eyes. "Sophie, I want to marry you." The room fell silent. Sophie froze, her mouth slightly open but no words came out. She looked down, then back up, her hands trembling softly. After a moment, she whispered, "Sir, I'm not saying no, but I need time to think." He nodded gently. "Take all the time you need, Sophie. I'll be waiting." She gave a small nod, grabbed her bag, and left the house, though her mind was restless, her heart crowded with questions. As she walked home, she wondered, is this real? Could this really be happening, or am I dreaming? From that day, Sophie observed Mr. Samson carefully. She didn't want to rush her answer. She needed to be sure of the kind of man he truly was. One morning, she arrived early and sat on a bench near the backyard, from where she could see the front gate. The gateman approached Mr. Samson, looking worried. "Sir, the plumber said he can't come today. There's traffic." Mr. Samson sighed and checked his watch. "Call him again. If he can't make it, we'll find someone else. This isn't the first time." The gateman nodded and walked away quickly. Mr. Samson spoke calmly, not raising his voice or insulting anyone, just firmly, like a true leader. Later that week, 2 of Mr. Samson's staff came by to drop off some files. One looked nervous, almost scared. Mr. Samson took the file and said, "You're late, but since it's your first time, I'll let it slide. Next time, call ahead." "Yes, sir," the young man said, head bowed. Mr. Samson patted his shoulder gently. "You're doing fine. Just be more serious about your time." They smiled, and Sophie watched everything from the kitchen doorway. She began to see something different. Mr. Samson wasn't soft or weak, but fair. He corrected mistakes without insulting, held authority without instilling fear. She also noticed how much he cared for his mother, always asking if she needed anything and spending quiet evenings listening to her share village stories. Sophie smiled to herself with each new discovery. At night, lying beside her brother, she whispered, "If I say yes, it will be because he's a good man." A week later, Sophie entered the house wearing a long yellow gown. Her hair was neatly styled, and her face glowed. Mama D was in the kitchen, and Mr. Sampson was reading a file in the sitting room. "Good morning, sir," Sophie greeted softly. Mr. Sampson looked up and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Sophie." She approached and stopped before him. "I've been thinking," she said. He closed the file and gave her his full attention. "I've thought about everything, and now I'm sure." She smiled clearly. "I will marry you." Mr. Sampson stood up, unable to hide his joy. His eyes widened, mouth opened in happiness, and he hugged her gently but wholeheartedly. "Thank you, Sophie. Thank you." Just then, Mama D entered the room, stopping as she saw them together. "What's happening?" she asked with a small smile. "Mama." Sophie answered. "Yes." Mama D dropped the spoon she held and exclaimed, "Thank you, Lord." She began dancing around the room, clapping and singing loudly. "My son has found a good wife. Thank you, Lord." Mr. Sampson and Sophie laughed together. Sophie's heart felt light, but deep inside she knew this was only the beginning. Sitting beside Mr. Sampson later in the living room, she held her phone and showed him something. Sampson," she said shyly, "I've been thinking. I want to go back to school." He looked surprised. "Really? That's a great idea. Do you want to go to a campus?" She shook her head. "No, I want to study online. That way, I can still help with the business." Sampson smiled. "Say no more." He quickly made arrangements and enrolled her in a top online university. He paid her tuition in full and even bought her a new laptop and study desk. But that wasn't all. He also discovered Sophie's true passion, cooking. Without telling her, he planned a surprise. One day, he drove her to a busy street in town. There, a new shop stood bright and inviting. Sophie stepped out of the car, confused. "Why are we here?" she asked. Sampson handed her the key. "This is your shop, Sophie. You're now the head of your own catering business." Sophie covered her mouth with both hands, tears filling her eyes as she read the signboard, "Sophie's Delight Kitchen." "Why are you doing all this?" she asked softly. "Because you deserve it," he said, looking into her eyes. "I know you don't want to just stay at home. You want to work, earn, and I love that about you." Sophie hugged him tightly, her heart full. The biggest blessing came a little later. One morning, as Sophie sat outside in the compound, a doctor arrived with good news. "We got the support we needed. Caleb can finally have the surgery." Sophie jumped up, shocked. "Are you serious?" The doctor nodded. "Your husband paid everything already." Sophie turned to Sampson, who stood quietly by the door, and ran into his arms, hugging him. Weeks later, Caleb had his surgery. The whole family waited outside the hospital, praying. When Caleb finally took his first step, Sophie dropped to her knees and wept. Her brother could walk again. Months passed until the wedding day arrived. Sophie wore a long white dress, her smile as bright as the morning sun. Sampson stood proudly by her side. The hall was filled with rich men and women. Mama D danced until her legs were tired. There was food, music, and joy everywhere. Sophie looked at Caleb, now walking and even dancing, then at Sampson, holding his hand. Her voice was soft, her heart full. "God has given me a new life." From that day, Sophie knew her days of sorrow were over. She had found love, peace, and a fresh start, and this time it was forever. This is how Sophie's life changed forever, from helping a poor old woman by the roadside and giving her food, to becoming the wife of a kind billionaire. The lesson here: sometimes, The small acts of kindness we offer strangers open doors we never imagined. Goodness may seem small, but it carries great rewards. So never stop doing good, even when no one is watching. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which part of this story touched your heart the most? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. I'll be reading and replying because your words matter to me. Also, don't forget, I'll be uploading another exciting story in a few days. So please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell to be the first to know when it's out. If you enjoyed this story, kindly hit the like button and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you deeply. See you in the next story.